In this lesson, we're going to continue learning about parallel lines and transversals and the angles that are formed. But the first thing we have to look at is if we have a situation where we don't have two parallel lines being cut by a transversal, so something that looks like this. Normally we look at having two parallel lines and we have a transversal, and we can look at the angles that are formed. But in this diagram below, we don't have that situation where we have two parallel lines and a transversal unless we create this dotted line in here that we're going to say is parallel to the two given lines. That dotted line is called an auxiliary line. So that's what we're going to extend and learn about in this video. So what auxiliary lines help us do is they allow us to actually use our knowledge about parallel lines being cut by a transversal and the different angles, and we can add them in, and we always add them such that they're parallel. So we say, okay, we're going to add this in, and it's now parallel to the given lines. So now what ends up happening is we have, here's two parallel lines, here's my transversal. Remember, transversal just intersects two or more lines. So now I have two parallel lines and a transversal. And then if I look over here, two parallel lines and a transversal. So I basically use that auxiliary line to create two of those diagrams that I'd like. And now that I have two sets of parallel lines being cut by a transversal, if I'm trying to find angle W, which is this entire angle right here, if I know angle E and if I know angle F, I could add those together and that'll give me angle W. So if we look at 41 and how that connects with angle E, so again, focusing on the yellow part of this diagram, it might be even helpful to turn your paper sideways to see, here's your parallel lines. And in between those parallel lines, I have 41 and E, so they're interior, opposite sides of the transversal, so they're alternate interior angles. So that means angle E has to also be 41, and I'm going to write this out because if we have parallel lines, that's going to imply that we have congruent alternate interior angles. And remember, we look for that Z shape, so those angles are congruent. Now if I move on to the green diagram, my parallel lines and my transversal, if I look at 35 and how that compares with angle F, well, I have another Z shape, or I have another pair of alternate interior angles. So that means angle F is 35. And again, same reason, parallel lines imply congruent alternate interior angles. So now if I want to find angle W, well, angle W is just add those two together. So it's just going to be 41 plus the 35 degrees. And that's going to give me 76. So that's my angle. So again, these auxiliary lines are lines or even rays or segments that we add to help us complete a problem because we don't have enough information without the auxiliary line to be able to use our parallel lines cut by a transversal. So let's look at a couple more examples. So if we look at example 1 here, we want to find angle X. So there's no auxiliary line drawn in, but we're going to go ahead and we're going to draw that line in. So angle X, right now I have two parallel lines on the top and on the bottom, but I don't have a transversal. So what I want to do is I want to draw in an auxiliary line. So let me make it a different color here. And making it dotted is sometimes nice because then you see that you've created that line. It doesn't have to be dotted. I can't get this to be dotted, so I'm just going to go ahead and use a different colored line so you know that I created it. And when you draw your auxiliary line, you make it so that it's parallel to your two given lines. And the reason why I draw my auxiliary line right there is because that allows this ray to be a transversal now between this parallel line and my auxiliary line, which is now parallel. So this is now a transversal. So I purposely want to make it so that this ray becomes a transversal because now I have that scenario I want. I have the picture. Also, now I have a portion of this angle right here is a portion of angle X, the entire thing. So when I look, angle 62, how does it relate to what I'm trying to find? I'm trying to find this big angle here. Well, this little portion has to be equal to 62, again, because parallel lines imply congruent alternate interior angles. And then if we look at the bottom half of the diagram, well, now here's my parallel lines, here's my transversal. And if I compare what they give me, the 144, so this angle, again, I care about this portion right here because I want to look at the angle in the end. I want angle X, which is the whole thing. So I want this other part. So if I compare these two, these angles have to be supplementary. Those are same side sup. So in this case, my reason is going to be parallel lines imply supplementary, same side interior angles. So if I want to find that part of angle X, I'm just going to do 180 minus 144. So I'm just going to write that 180 minus 144 just to show the work for how I got 36. 36 is this angle. And now the last step here is if we want to find angle X, I'm going to take this entire angle, which is angle X. I'm going to add these up. So I'm going to do 62 plus 36. And I end up with 98 degrees. And it looks reasonable. That looks like a 98-degree angle. So it seems reasonable. Let's do one more. So for this picture here, we want to find angle 3. So again, look at where angle 3 is located. And I look at my picture and I see two parallel lines, but I don't have a transversal right now. Because remember, transversals have to intersect two or more other lines. So if I create an auxiliary line that goes right through this intersection point, that is going to be allow me to have two transversals. So that's what we want to do. So there's my auxiliary line. Again, now I have the top half of this diagram. So there's my two parallel lines. There's my transversal. I'm going to just add the little parallel symbol on here because it's parallel to all of those lines, or the two given parallel lines. So now I look at, okay, well, how is that going to help me get down to angle 3? So right now you might not see it. Well, I'm not trying to find this angle this time. But if we go ahead and we look at angle 3, well, now that I have this parallel line, this auxiliary line that I've drawn, and I have this transversal, well, keep in mind, angle 3 is going to be equal to whatever this part is right here. So that part of 67 is what angle 3 is going to be equal to because those are alternate interior angles formed by parallel lines. So basically, if I know this piece up top, I could subtract that from 67, which will give me this part that angle 3 is equal to. So that's why I care about the top half of the diagram. So then the question is, again, looking back at the yellow portion of the diagram, how does 35 relate to this angle right here? Well, when I look at those, 35 is in the same position as this. Imagine taking the top half, sliding it down. 35 has to be equal to this portion right here. Let me get rid of that circle there. So this is going to be equal because those are corresponding angles. They're in the same position. So I'm going to write that out. So parallel lines implies congruent corresponding angles. So that gives me 35. Then I'm going to say 67 minus 35. That'll give me that other portion I want. So 67 minus 35 gives us 32. So that means this portion of 67 has to be 32, which now means angle 3 has to be 32. Because remember what we said, parallel lines imply congruent alternate interior angles. So now I can say angle 3 is 32. So notice every time I did one of these problems, I'm justifying my reasons. I'm justifying why I'm marking. That's something you really want to focus on in geometry. It's not just can you figure out the numbers, but can you justify? Okay, so that's going to be important. And of course, you could just list them out like this. You can number your different steps that you're taking or why you're doing the things. That's fine if that makes it more organized. You can bullet point your work or your explanations as you go. But you do need to have your justification. So go ahead and work through the check your understanding problems. Make sure you're justifying your responses or your why you're marking things congruent or why you're doing supplementary angles as you work through it. Okay, because that'll be an important part. And then we will talk about our key ideas and check your understanding problems in class tomorrow.